Picture this, Alex Eala hasn't even played her first Cincinnati match yet, and somehow the buzz around her already feels bigger than the court itself. Filipino flags are appearing again, fans are tracking every update, tournament organizers are openly calling her one of the players to watch, and the same Eala fever that exploded in Washington and Toronto is now rolling into Ohio. And sitting in the background of this incredible rise is one of the biggest names Eala grew up admiring, Maria Sharapova. Now, social media has been running with dramatic claims that Sharapova personally witnessed the Cincinnati frenzy and couldn't believe it. It is the important part, there is no verified public statement from Sharapova specifically reacting to the Cincinnati crowd as of now. But Sharapova has already publicly acknowledged Eala in a way that makes this entire moment even more fascinating. After Eala's historic Wimbledon breakthrough, Sharapova called her a star. That wasn't some random fan account. That was one of the most recognizable champions in modern tennis taking notice. And now look at what has happened since. Eala has gone from exciting prospect to one of the hottest stories on the WTA Tour in a matter of weeks. Cincinnati's own tournament website is describing the 21-year-old Filipina as a sensation who has captivated fans around the world, specifically pointing to the huge crowds that follow her wherever she competes. She enters her Cincinnati debut seeded número 17, an incredible position considering how quickly her ranking has climbed. That's why Sharapova's earlier praise suddenly carries even more weight. When someone like Maria Sharapova calls a young player a star, tennis fans pay attention. Sharapova knows exactly what sudden fame feels like. She knows what it's like to walk onto a court as a young player and suddenly realize thousands of people are no longer just watching your forehand. They're watching you. Your personality. Your emotions. Your every move. Eala is beginning to experience that same shift. The numbers tell part of the story. The crowds tell the rest. Her breakthrough reached another level at Wimbledon, where Eala stunned defending champion Iga Swiatek 7-6, 6-2. That victory made her the first Filipino player to reach the fourth round of a Grand Slam. Center court watched a young woman who grew up training in the Philippines stand across the net from one of the biggest champions of her generation and refused to blink. That was the moment Sharapova publicly reacted. And since then, Eala has somehow gotten even bigger. Washington was next. Eala entered the Mubadala City DC Open and ripped through one of the toughest runs imaginable. By the time she reached the final, Jessica Pegula was waiting. The match was interrupted by weather, stretched across 2 days, and Eala eventually came back from a set down to win 4-6, 6-4, 6-0. That victory made her the first player from the Philippines to win a WTA Tour level singles title. Let that sink in. Not just the first Filipina woman. The first player from the Philippines, period. And she did it against the top seed, finishing the match by completely taking control of the deciding set. Reuters reported that Eala won 10 of the final 13 games after play resumed, riding a strong left-handed serve and fearless baseline tennis while an increasingly vocal crowd got behind her. That title pushed Eala to a career-high ranking around world número 20. Then came Toronto. And that's where the whole Eala effect turned from an exciting tennis story into something tournament organizers could physically see happening around them. Toronto crowds packed in for Eala. Filipino flags were everywhere. The noise became part of the match. Her third-round battle against Katie McNally was played in front of an electric center court filled with Filipino supporters, and McNally later described the atmosphere around Eala as something on another level. Eala eventually lost to Belinda Bencic, but something strange happened after the defeat. The hat didn't disappear. Usually, tennis moves on fast. Lose your match, pack your bags, and the tournament spotlight moves to whoever is still standing. Not this time. People were already asking about Cincinnati. When was Eala traveling? What seed will she receive? Who will she face? Would the Filipino fans show up again? The answer to that final question almost felt obvious. Of course they would. Cincinnati organizers themselves had seen enough evidence before she even arrived. When announcing the player field, the tournament specifically highlighted Eala and Brazilian star Joao Fonseca as players with passionate, noisy supporters who travel with their colors around the world. That acknowledgement matters because it shows tournaments are no longer treating Eala's crowds as some random one-week phenomenon. Then the draw came out. Eala was seeded número 17 for her Cincinnati debut, earning a first-round bye. The tournament preview described her as one of the major stories to watch and noted that Amanda Anisimova could be waiting in the third round. Think about how fast everything changed. Not long ago, Eala was a promising young player trying to establish herself inside the upper levels of the tour. Now tournaments are promoting her as an attraction before she hits a ball. Fans are showing up with Philippine flags. Hit opponents know the crowd may be against them before warm-ups even begin. And one of Eala's childhood idols has already publicly called her a star. That is where the Sharapova connection becomes so compelling. Eala has spoken about looking up to Sharapova growing up. Sharapova wasn't simply another champion she watched occasionally. She was one of the players who represented what Eala dreamed of becoming. So imagine the full-circle nature of this moment. A young girl watches Sharapova dominate the sport. Years later, that same young girl grows up, reaches Wimbledon center court, beats the defending champion, and suddenly Sharapova herself is commenting on her rise. And now the crowds are getting bigger. The ranking is climbing. The first WTA trophy is already in the cabinet. That doesn't mean we should invent a Cincinnati reaction from Sharapova that she hasn't publicly made. In fact, the truth is strong enough without doing that. What Sharapova already said looks more interesting with every passing week. A star. 2 words. But look at what has happened since. Eala won Washington. She entered the top 20. She became the first Filipino WTA singles champion. She drew huge crowds in Toronto. She arrives in Cincinnati as a seeded player and one of the tournament's most talked about attractions. That is not hype created by a thumbnail. That is momentum. And maybe the craziest part is that Eala still seems to be learning how to handle all of it. After Toronto, she talked about needing a short break. She wanted a couple of days away from tennis before Cincinnati, some time to reset mentally and physically after a demanding stretch. That's another thing Sharapova would understand better than most. Fame in tennis can arrive before a player has time to process what is happening. 1 week, you're focused almost entirely on rankings and improving your game. The next, people are discussing how many tickets your matches can sell. That creates a new kind of pressure. Eala is no longer only carrying her own expectations. She has become a symbol of Filipino tennis. When she plays, people thousands of miles away organize their schedules around her matches. Familias watch together. Filipino communities in North America show up with flags. People who may not have followed the WTA closely before suddenly know the draw. That kind of connection is incredibly valuable to tennis. And it's why Eala's rise is beginning to feel different from the normal story of a talented young player climbing the rankings. There is tennis success. Then there is cultural impact. Eala is starting to experience both at once. The WTA has already documented how strongly crowds respond to her. At the Australian Open earlier this year, her match against Alicia Parks drew a maximum capacity, heavily pro-Eala crowd. Parks admitted afterward that the atmosphere affected her focus early in the match. Washington followed. Toronto followed. Now Cincinnati is waiting. So when you see people online saying Maria Sharapova couldn't believe the Cincinnati frenzy, separate the dramatic headline from what we actually know. There is no verified Cincinnati-specific Sharapova reaction yet. But there is something real. Sharapova has noticed Alex Eala. She has called her a star. And Eala has spent the weeks since making that description look increasingly accurate. Maybe Sharapova will comment again. Maybe she won't. The bigger point is that Eala no longer needs famous names to validate what's happening around her. The crowds are validating it. The rankings are validating it. The title in Washington validated it. And Cincinnati itself is promoting Eala as one of the players capable of creating major excitement during the tournament. Now comes the part that matters most. She has to play. Because popularity gets people into the stadium. Results keep them coming back. Eala knows that better than anyone. Her first run by gives her a little more recovery time after Toronto. Then the pressure returns. Every opponent will know what she has accomplished. Every opponent will understand the crowd could turn heavily pro-Eala. And every match will carry expectations that simply didn't either a year ago. But that might be exactly where Alex Eala wants to be. She has spent this season proving she belongs in these conversations. Now she gets another stage. Another American city. Another crowd. And another opportunity to show why Maria Sharapova looked at her Wimbledon breakthrough and saw something special. Cincinnati hasn't even truly started for Alex Eala yet, and the story is already building. If the Filipino fans turn Ohio into another sea of flags, nobody should be surprised anymore. Washington warned us. Toronto confirmed it. And Cincinnati may be about to experience the next chapter of the Alex Eala phenomenon. Sharapova called her a star. Now Eala has the chance to keep proving exactly why.